In this lesson, we'll take a look at some of the polygon modeling tools that can be used to modify our geometry. So let's say that we want to start creating something that's actually useful rather than a primitive sphere or cube. And so let's say we want to start to create something like a wheel rim. And so we'll think about what the shape of a wheel rim is, and we'll try to get a primitive that matches to start from. So I think in this case, we'll create a polygon primitive pipe. Go ahead and drop that in, and we can change some of the values here in our input, just as we looked at earlier. So I'm going to change the radius. Let's change the height a little bit, and also we'll change the thickness a bit. Okay, and I'll increase the number of subdivisions there so it's a little bit smoother. And now to get rid of the attributes here, I'll go ahead and delete the history. Okay, so that eliminates the ability for us to modify this. But if we were to go in and modify the components and then try to go back and modify those values, we're not going to get results that we would expect anyway. And so we want to go from a point where we've got the primitive that's parametric, where we can change those values, to a point where we've got just a polygon object that we can modify. And so now we can use a couple of very common tools to modify this. So we'll start by inserting edge loops. And we'll go to the polygon menu set and go to insert edge loop tool. And let's say we want to create a rim out here on the end. We'll just click and drag on these edges, and you can very quickly add edge loops. Okay, that'll help us define a sort of lip that we want to extrude out. So we'll select this and then shift double click to select the entire loop of faces. And then we'll use another very common tool, which is going to be the extrude tool. Click extrude, and you'll see the manipulator appear on one of the faces. To pull these out, we'll just pull this out in the Z, and you can see those new faces being created there based on our polygon selection. Okay, let's say we want to now create an extrude in the center, and we want to have a couple of edges there. We can go to our insert edge loop tool, and this time we'll go into the options and choose multiple edge loops. And we can add those very quickly. In order to space those out, we can simply scale them to pull them out. Now we have the area defined that we want to actually extrude, so we'll select that. And again, use extrude. Now as you go through the modeling process, extrude is going to be a very common tool for you, as is your insert edge loop tool, which we looked at. So those are going to both be very common modeling tools for you to be able to use. Okay, so that will enable us to get something like a wheel rim that we've got here. Okay, and just working from a simple shape. Now let's do something a little bit more complex. Let's create kind of a bolt. So we'll start by creating the shaft of the bolt. So we'll go to polygon primitives. Let's just drop in a cylinder, and let me go ahead and just Control H to hide that wheel. And so for the cylinder, I want to give it a little bit more height. I want to make sure it has plenty of subdivisions here. Okay, so maybe 24 or so. Now let's actually bump that up a little bit. Go maybe 30, let's do maybe 36. We've got plenty of subdivisions here. And I also want to give it some subdivisions along the height. Okay, so we'll give it maybe 12. So pretty high resolution piece of geometry here. You can see all of the edges that we've got there. Okay, now I want to create a smooth portion up here, and then I want to create the threads of the bolt down here at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is use extrude. So this time I'm going to select, go ahead and select basically every other row of faces all the way around. Okay, just by clicking, shift double clicking, shift click, shift double click. Okay, and that will allow me to come around and get all of those loops. Okay, we'll go all the way back over here. And now I want to actually select everything above this point. So can go ahead and select, shift select all of those. So control click and then shift click. And so this is kind of what we are left with here. Okay, so now we want to actually extrude this out. So the idea is this will stay smooth, and then we'll have some vertical threads here coming in. So we use extrude. So extrude works on whatever selection that you have. So we'll go ahead and just pull this out. Okay. And let's go ahead and select these. And let's go ahead and just extrude this out just a little bit more, just a hair. Okay, I can go ahead and delete those polygons at the top. Okay, now the idea is I want to twist this. So there's actually some deformers that we can use when we're modeling. So we'll go up to, instead of polygons or even surfaces, we'll actually go to animation, create deformers, and let's create a non-linear twist. So you can see that twist located in here. Here's where we're going to actually, under the inputs, modify that just as we would with the primitives. I'm going to turn off the grid so we can see this. And let's go ahead and turn on our wireframe here. And so we've got the start angle and end angle. So I'm going to change the, let's actually change, no, it doesn't matter which one we change here. But I'm going to change the end angle until we get a nice twist for those threads there. Okay. Now we've got a high and low bound. So this is kind of the bounds here. Let's go ahead and change that. You can see that twists only the top. So we'll undo that and we'll change the bottom value. You can see how that just twists the bottom. Okay. We change that to 0.5 or maybe 0.3. So something like that. And we'll change this end angle value here so it's not quite so drastic. So we want to end up with something like that. We'll turn off our wireframe. So you get kind of a bolt with threads like that. Now to create the top, we'll create another polygon primitive cylinder. But this time, let's change our creation values here. So we'll increase the radius, but we'll take the subdivisions all the way down to 6. So we get a nice hex look and change the height value. Okay. Now one of the key things about computer generated geometry is the fact that by default you get these very hard edges. And that's one of the key giveaways that something is computer generated, is the fact that it's got these hard edges, because in real life, even if something has what we think of as a very hard edge, it's not going to be that razor sharp. You're going to get some sort of a hit of light along that edge, some sort of irregularity. And so to add irregularity and kind of knock off the edges, we can use a bevel. So I'm going to go ahead and select, basically let's just select all of our edges, and then we'll deselect the edges in the middle. So we've got kind of all of these edges selected, and you can see what that looks like. So now we'll go back to polygons, and let's choose edit mesh, and let's bevel. So you can see that instead of an edge now, we've got a loop of faces. Now under the inputs, we'll go ahead and just change the offset so we can see what a tighter bevel will look like. Okay, and you can see that there's only one polygon there. We can actually change that by changing the number of segments. And we can change the roundness as well. Okay. And so the difference between this and the other is obvious. You can see how this has a beveled edge, which just brings it a little bit more into the realistic world than something with an extremely hard edge. Okay. And so those are just a few tools that we can use to actually create geometry. Saw how we could create something like a wheel very quickly, and then our bolt with a couple of different pieces. And those are going to be some of the more common polygon tools: beveling, extruding, inserting edge loops. And we go into much greater detail, cover all kinds of polygon modeling tools in some of the projects in our library, and also in the Introduction to Modeling, go through all of those tools in a very detailed way so that you can really get some experience with those. Okay, so be sure and check those out. The next thing that we want to look at is some of the NURBS modeling tools that are available. How do we work with NURBS? What are some of the tools that are used to create NURBS pieces? And so we'll go ahead and take a look at that in the next lesson.